Freshlist.io.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of You Deserve Fresh Lettuce. I am your co-host Rachel.
And I'm Dahlia.
And in this episode we're going to be talking about when they're the dad. You can date, you're at the age where you can date the dad or the son. Oh my gosh.
Oh no.
Don't forget that you can listen to the show on your favorite podcast platform or ask
Alexa. Or you can iHeartRadio,
yes.
Apple Podcasts,
Yep.
YouTube. There is so many ways to find us. We're not too hard to find.
And you want to stay in contact or up to date, be sure to follow us on social media at YDFL Podcast across all platforms. All right, let's get into it.
Yes.
Dating, okay, being a woman of a certain age, it does, right, put you right in that sweet spot of like, oh, I met the son, but then I met the dad. What is that?
I don't know.
My gosh.
I think like anytime I hear this, and when I knew that we were going to do this, I remember thinking about Maluma and Maluma's dad. Because, obviously Maluma's freaking hot. And then you see the dad and you're like, oh my gosh, Maluma's dad is hot too.
Yes.
So, not that I would have a chance with either or, but it's nice to look at both to be like, man, his offspring and the daddy is like,
I guess it's kind of like, Julio Iglesias, back in the day, I was a little girl, I wasn't really into him, but it was like he was a heartthrob, and then all of a sudden he gives birth, he doesn't give birth, but he spawns this child of his, Enrique, that came out super hottie.
He's so
body.
handsome.
Yeah, so Enrique is definitely a hottie body. I'm sure that there's plenty of women that are in that sweet spot that have, given the opportunity, they'd probably be like, which one do I go with?
Well, I do think that Julio Iglesias, like you said, maybe back in the day for sure, he was that one person or that one guy. But, you see it more often than not where, it's kind of like the kids aren't really kids, but they're kids because they're in their 20s and then they're super handsome. And then you see the dads and you're like, oh my gosh, because, if you do the math, it's basically like double the age usually, and it works. And, I think what trips me out the most, though, when I've seen or heard or you listen to this Jerry Springer type style things where like the guys will hook up with the mom and hook up with the girl. And that's, to me, that's like there has to be some type of respect when it comes to that. Like you can't literally hook up with both. But I mean, it's nice to be like, no.
Okay, so you guys all know, right? This is like season 2. We're like almost 2 years into this.
Yeah.
I'm a boy mom. I raised boys into men, and let me tell you what would happen. There are countless stories or countless times when they would go to like the house party in, high school, and next thing you know, there's stories where like the mom was like the one handing out the alcohol, and we live in the suburbs, by the way. This isn't like any urban tale, and no joke, both sons who were 5 years apart had the same experiences with some of the moms. And
was it the same moms or just
it was different moms because they're 5 years apart.
Yeah,
so they had different friends groups and everything. And ironically, it was like, wait, why is this repeating itself? Not just with my older son, with my younger son. Yeah. And it kind of looked like, okay, the boy was like into the daughter.
Okay.
So like my son would be like into the daughter, like, oh, kid's girl at school, she's kind of hot, she's kind of cute, whatever. She's having a party, everyone goes to the party, and then here's the mom, super slippery, super like trying to be with the kids and trying to like be cool with the kids and hang out with the kids and be in their conversation at the party. Next thing you know, oh, here, it's fine. Like, it's better for you to do it here than somewhere out in the streets.
Of course.
Now like one of the kids is buzzed or whatever. Now they're both buzzed. But then my sons had those dilemmas of like, I mean, I like so-and-so, but the mom is
going hard in the pavement.
Hard in the pavement.
Yeah, that's
and that's like high school. That was like in high school. Well,
it's kind of like, what is it? The, oh my gosh.
American Pie.
American Pie.
Stifler's mom.
Stifler's mom, by the way, recently I just saw something about her. She said because of that role that she had on American Pie, she got laid over 200 times. And it's really weird because most women don't talk about being laid, like this is a guy situation. Like guys normally talk like that, right?
I didn't know this.
Yeah, I totally could share it with you. It's so funny because she's like, yep, during that whole entire time, she said that it just came to her, and
no pun intended.
No kidding. Yeah, no kidding. But you know what I think is most funny about that is that she is the reason why there is the word MILF.
Yes.
And then now, they have DILF.
She's the original MILF.
Yes. And then now they have GILF because a lot of the women are looking younger.
What's a GILF?
Grandma, I'd like you know, or grandpa, I'd like to, you know.
Oh,
yeah, that's what a guilt.
What?
Yeah, don't feel guilty if you're trying to get with the guilty. Right.
Sure. Oh man, Tommy tequila.
Okay. But I think it's kind of awesome, though. I mean, she's very open. She's like, this is what it is. It got me laid.
I think what's interesting about
blah.
that particular thing, not to get like too far on track, is that so many people are like, you know, you're like a sex symbol in Hollywood, Pamela Anderson's or whatever. And this woman, you know, became famous for essentially, it was like a mockery. It was like, she's actually not hot, but she understood that that was the role of like, oh, hey, like being the, you know, the older mom and all that.
I remember I thought she was kind of pretty, though. Like,
no,
they really got her with like the whole...
But your eyes, God gave you eyes to see the beauty and all.
And everything's beautiful. Yes.
But here's the thing, but it was supposed to be like a mockery or a joke, right? But the fact that like it just played, like it literally played, you know.
And when did like, okay, I know we're going off track, but it's kind of within the same thing that we're talking about. When did American Pie...
It's from the 90s.
Yeah, so imagine, we're talking 30 years later.
This
is 30 years later.
And American Pie is
still hear
MILF. Yeah.
She's a MILF.
And everybody still knows who Stifler's mom is.
Kind of, yeah. It's so funny.
You know, I think with young boys, it's always kind of been a thing. I remember there was a music video that came out, and it was like Stacy's mom has got it going on.
Yeah.
So I think it's always kind of been a little thing with the moms, right? And I've met plenty of females growing up that the moms were even so much prettier than the daughter. And, you know, it doesn't mean that the daughter didn't grow up and blossom in her own right, but, you know, you see that a lot. So the boy would be like, oh, I really like her. She's so cool. And then they meet the mom and they're like, oh,
but I like her more.
So I think with boys it's common. With girls now, it seems to be more like, because we're in the era of, like, equality and all this kind of sexual, like, freedom and stuff.
I've heard a few stories where, you know, the like, kind of like, because you're a boy mom, you know, the one mom is allowing all the boys to come over. They're going swimming. She's giving them alcohol. And I heard a story, I'm not going to say no names, obviously, but, you know, this particular couple was in the middle of a divorce. So she wanted to stay in the house. So the husband said, you could stay in the house. However, the rules here are you cannot bring anybody here because he's going to be paying the mortgage. You cannot bring a man here. If he wants to date you and he wants to take you out, he could take you out wherever he needs to, but you're not going to do it in my house.
Not in the house that he pays for.
And granted, they broke up because of other reasons. You know, everyone kind of found their own mate, however, whatever. Point of the matter is, that's irrelevant. He said you cannot bring anybody here. So, that was the rule. Next thing you know, she starts hooking up with the younger son's friend in the room. And that kind of got out. It was a whole situation. I mean, it's not like sad, oh, poor thing, but I just think it's kind of different.
But see how it's received differently, because I remember seeing a special, I think I told you about this, with Hulk Hogan. And he's a famous WWE wrestler from the 80s and 90s and all that. And he had his wife, and they were a very famous couple. They had famous kids.
I remember that.
And the son, I believe it was either the daughter's really good male friend or the son's really good male friend, hooked up with her when they were going through their divorce. And apparently till this day, the huge mansion on the lake that Hulk Hogan paid for, the wife kept it, and that kid lives now. He's not as much of a kid, but he moved in. He was a kid, and she was already, you know, whatever age.
Yeah, she's probably in her 50s.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's
I mean,
happened.
It kind of goes back to the cougarism. We always talk about cougars and they're, you know, looking for their cubs. I thought this was kind of ironic just because, for me, I feel like, you remember, like, for me, my girls, I remember when they were born, and I remember, like, timelines. Like, okay, you know, they were going to kindergarten at this time. They were doing junior high at this time. And to look at a young child that you're, like, within the same timeline as my child, I think it'd be really weird to me, just because I would think, oh my gosh, I could have been taking him to kindergarten, but instead I'm taking him to the bedroom.
That's exactly.
And that's kind of the weird thing.
That's where I'm at. So for me, you know, I know that there's a lot of women my age, and they're attractive, and they'll see a young guy. It could be a movie. It could be anything, and this guy in his 20s and rips off his shirt, and all the ladies are like, oh my God, so amazing. I cannot do it. Like, when I tell you, I cannot do it, because my sons were in their 20s, and like my youngest right now, as I'm filming this, is about to be 24. So to me, to go and see some guy, maybe he's a young cop or whatever it might be, I actually can't like swoon or whatever you call it over a 20-something-year-old. Because I'm a boy mom, I see babies. And we work in an office where my son also has an office. And some of the ladies will be like, oh my God, he's so handsome, your son. And then I'm like, But I call them the kids. And
you say calling them the kids.
They've asked me to please, because a whole group of them, to please.
Can you start calling us the young men?
Yes, the young guns or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think forever I will see the age group that my son is. I'm always gonna see that age group. I think as like childish, young.
I could see that.
Yeah.
But I thought this story was kind of weird, ironic, crazy.
Yes.
Anyway, long story longer, he kicked her out of the house. It was forthcoming, right? Yeah. I mean, it was forthcoming. Those were the rules. I'm not saying that I would have obliged to the rules in a way. I wouldn't have brought my son. I wouldn't have hooked up with my son's friend.
Yeah.
But she decided to do it, and I think maybe it was one of those things when you're upset and you're like, I'm gonna get revenge this way. Whatever it was, I just thought it was kind of weird.
Did you ever see that true story? I saw a documentary or something where these high school girls got together. The one girl was a nanny. She was being paid to babysit, and one of the dads ended up hitting on her, in the laundry room or something, if I remember correctly. If you guys know this documentary or story, you can drop a comment below. But it turned out to be a scandal because the one dad and her ended up getting involved, and he started paying her money. Oh. And it was kind of hush money, kind of like,
don't say nothing.
Yeah. So then it turned out to be this whole thing where she goes, do you have friends? Because I have friends. And then it turned into where the dads would meet up at the dog park.
Tell your friends.
And
hey, my friends. We could all be friends.
But it turned into this whole, I got a nanny for you. And then the girl would go to high school, kind of Epstein status. She'd go to high school and say, hey, do you want to babysit? But then she'd explain, this is what it is. And then it was you're already making out with guys anyways. Who cares? And now here's this whole community with nannies or babysitters, high school girls,
so they're
sleeping
14,
with the dads.
17, what's it?
Teenagers in high school, and they're sleeping with the dads. By 14, the girls are fully developed. That's it.
Yeah,
that's as good as they're already
still kids, but
that's what they're gonna look like. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, it's they were all having sex with the dads across town for money, and they were making money. And I wish I knew the name of it, but it just puts into perspective that young girls, because you might sit there going, oh my God, what would a young girl want with my husband? Who's 35 or 40, and it's I'm not saying, well, if he pays her, but what I am saying is you just never know the attraction.
That's literally what the exchange was. It was money. I
mean,
she probably wouldn't have.
The first one was attracted to him. That's how it started. So the first one was actual chemistry and attraction.
Yeah.
And you got to remember, young girls, like I said, by the age of 14, they already have their feelings and they're already going through their things. And I know when I was a young girl in school, by 14, everybody was already sort of sexually involved on some level. And it was funny, I had a conversation in the office with one of the ladies, and her son is 15 or 16, I forget what age, and she still thinks that he's not really aware of some of that stuff. And my son and I were standing there going, that happened a long time ago.
You're in for a rude awakening when you find out that
But I get really surprised at how age sometimes isn't a factor. So,
but I think what it is with what you're saying is that that's happened forever and ever and ever. Men seek younger women. That's happened since I can remember, before the age of time.
Yes.
But nowadays, the women that are just the women that are going after the cubs, and it's almost within a social group. It's oh yeah, I got me a young one, and he goes all night and da 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 and da da da, and it's always I think that's their justification for going so young. Because I just don't know what else.
I think it's validating. I think men of a certain age are trying to validate themselves by being with younger women.
Right.
And I think women of a certain age being with really young guys, they're also validating themselves because they think they still got it, right? Mm-hmm. When they're not keeping in mind that there's always going to be someone that's going to be with you. It doesn't matter what you look like. But the interesting thing when you see in media now, you got Kris Jenner, the queen of television, essentially, of unscripted television.
The queen of Corey. Building billionaires.
She births billionaires like it's like a slot, like a freaking ATM.
Golden goose.
She's a golden goose, and she's with Corey, and Corey is, I think, Chloe's age.
Okay.
So he's a young guy, semi-young guy. I think he just turned 40. Then you got Kim.
Right.
with Pete, which they just broke up, now that we're filming this.
Yeah.
But you have this trend, and there's a lot more, by the way.
Right.
That they're like, I made my money, I had my kids, I've done the marriage thing.
Now
it's like physical.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I know that we've talked about this before. There's this rule of thumb, right? The mathematics on how young you should go. So if you're 40 years old, you should go half on your age, so that should be 20. Then you add
half?
8, so half of the age, right? So say for instance you're 40.
Yes.
So you go half on the age, which would make you 20. Then you add 8 to that, which would make you 20, which would make him 28. So if you're 40 years old, you shouldn't date anyone younger than 28. That is mathematically, somebody came up with this. I don't know it to be true, but that
for
should
women
be
or men too?
For women. For women, for men, I don't know, man. Men are some else sometimes. I'm not to bash anybody, and women too, by the way. But I'm just
Scott
saying,
Disick.
yeah, and women too, though. But I'm just saying that was the mathematics that was given. Half your age plus 8. So if you're a 40-year-old woman, you shouldn't be with anyone younger than 28 years old.
It's so funny because, at least when I was growing up, it was this whole narrative that girls are 3 years more mature than men are. So I can't, that's really drilled into my head, and I do see it.
It's so true. Even with men that are even like 50, you're like, are you sure you're 50? Because you act like you're like,
put it back in the oven a little bit longer.
Yeah, you're still not cooked.
So I think that, the moral dilemma is like, here you are in a situation and you have the son and then you have the dad, and as women it's like now we have these options and everybody's more sort of sexually free and morally free. The standards have completely changed, and it's almost like people are like, well, I could do both. And let me tell you something. I have seen so many times on social media and everything where women are bragging about how they were dating the son and cheated on the son with the dad. And, again, as a boy mom who I look forward to going to my son's wedding one day, when I tell you that thought of like my ex-husband potentially crossing the line, because, we know he's a little slithery guy. Slithery snake.
I hope not.
You know what I mean? The thought of it, though, that this is like something that's happening Jerry Springer style. And by the way, it used to be like for Jerry Springer. And now people are like, oh, yeah? You want to go do that? You want to make me feel insecure? I'm going to go be with your dad.
Hello.
And it's like, what?
Yeah, I hope no one's that vindictive. They're like, I'm going to be with your dad. Can you imagine?
When I was growing up, girls, when I was in school, they thought my dad was so good looking. And it was this whole thing. They'd come over and be like, hi, Armando. And it was weird to like watch this happen.
I thankfully never had that. My dad's like super Mexican, ranchero. And he's like, no, get up. You'd probably like tell someone that. I don't think my dad would be going. He's like, no. He's like such a rancher. So I never experienced that.
Hey, that sounds like an utter blessing. If I could be with a man who sees a young
girl,
handsome, young, good-looking, like flirting girl, and he's like, no,
don't get it twisted. He stays saying that 15-year-olds want to get with him. He's like a 70-year-old man. I'm like, Dad, calm down.
Yeah,
relax. Calm down, you Hefner. I'm like, ain't nobody trying to get with you. Calm down. But it's so funny, but it's so true. Anyway, whatever you decide, just remember there is mathematics to it, supposedly. If you're 40, don't date anyone under 28. Do the math. But if you want to date both of them, that's up to you.
Man, you like drama in your life?
You want the DILF, the GILF, and the MILF? That's all on you. So that's all we got.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. Check us out next week. And remember, you deserve fresh lettuce.
Cheers. Salud.